This is Autoline Daily, the show dedicated to enthusiasts of the global automotive industry. It took nearly 2 years, but the UAW and Volkswagen have finally come to an agreement on a labor contract. In April of 2024, nearly 3/4 of the 3,000 workers at VW's plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, voted to join the union. But talks dragged after that, and the UAW even threatened to strike. Now the two sides have come to an agreement, but it still needs to be approved by workers. The contract includes a 20% wage increase over 4 years, a 20% reduction in health care costs, a $6,550 ratification bonus, $2,250 in annual bonuses, plus long-term job security provisions. There was an effort to decertify the union by some workers because the negotiations were going slowly, but we think that effort will end if workers vote in favor of the contract. This is a big moment for the UAW. It's the first time it's organized a foreign-owned car plant in the South. General Motors is preparing for an economic downturn. GM's chief financial officer, Paul Jacobson, says, quote, "We're going to see a weak economy at some point. I hope it's not this year, hope it's not the year after that, but it's coming." In order to minimize the impact, GM is tightening dealer inventory and focusing on free cash flow. GM typically has 4 to 6 months of vehicles on dealer lots, but now it's aiming to keep that at 50 to 60 days supply, which will help it avoid discounting vehicles if demand is slow. GM is also increasing free cash flow. It historically had about $3 billion, but its free cash flow is now around $10 billion. Jacobson says that cushion will help it, quote, absorb short-term shocks to demand. We've got the latest financial numbers from Volvo and Jaguar Land Rover, and for them at least, it's a bloodbath out there. JLR, as you know, was crippled by a cyber attack in the last quarter, and the numbers really reflect that. Sales plummeted 42%, and it lost almost 300 million pounds versus a profit of 373 million pounds a year ago. JLR is on a March fiscal cycle, which is why you'll note that last quarter was actually Q3 for the company. Meanwhile, Volvo saw its sales drop 7%, which dragged revenue down almost 11%. Its operating profit and earnings per share plummeted 98%, and it posted a net loss of $333 million. But that also includes a $1.3 billion one-time write-off for the EX90 and ES90, which have been a technological and sales disaster. Its earnings per share dropped 98%, and that sent investors running for the exits. Volvo's stock dropped 27% on the news. NIO announced it expected to post a GAAP operating profit for the last quarter of anywhere from $29 to $200 million. That's a pretty wide gap because NIO says this is based on an early estimate that features incomplete and unaudited data. But that was good enough for investors who pushed the stock up almost 6.5% in pre-market trading. Nissan, Volkswagen, and Mercedes-Benz are coming off a weak 2025 in the U.S. market. VW saw its sales drop 13%, while Mercedes and Nissan eked out minuscule gains. But hope springs eternal, and all three brands are predicting big jumps in sales this year. Nissan says sales in the U.S. will grow 6%, and it expects to be back to selling 1 million vehicles a year by the end of 2027. Mercedes is predicting that its sales will grow 7% this year to 325,000 units, and it's targeting 400,000 by the end of the decade, while VW says its sales will grow 10% this year to about 363,000 vehicles. Well, here's our Autoline insight. Let's see if these companies can pull this off. Usually, when you add up all these sales predictions of the car companies, the number is bigger than the actual market.
Developing today's vehicles. Issues can happen in an instant. When's the best time to solve a problem? The minute you know you have one. Meet wireless NeoVi Cloud, your secure, off-the-shelf solution empowering real-time collaboration for quick resolution. With wireless NeoVi Cloud, your team can prevent issues before they can escalate. Driver communication data and remote diagnostics to analyze and resolve your problems using OTA, allowing your executives oversight throughout the process. Wireless NeoVi Cloud, your vehicle update solution in production and on the road. Intrepid Control Systems, driven by your data.
Higher new car prices and expensive technology are driving dealers into a part of the business that was once frowned upon, selling salvage or branded title vehicles. These can be vehicles that were written off by insurance companies for severe body or frame damage or for being involved in a flood. But increasingly, vehicles with minor damage are being written off because the repair requires expensive electronics to be replaced. However, there's more incentive now to fix those vehicles and sell them on dealer lots. The average new car price has hovered around $50,000 for over a year, which is driving more consumers into the used car market, which is squeezing inventory and pushing up used car prices too. So finding a used car in the $10,000 to $15,000 range is harder and harder. But that's where these salvage title vehicles come in. Insurance companies totaled about 17 million vehicles in the U.S. last year, and an estimated 2.5 million of those made it back onto the road with a salvage or branded title. With vehicle inventory piling up in China, many Chinese automakers are expanding around the world as fast as they can. BYD is the biggest exporter out of China, and Brazil is one of its most popular destinations. But it's also started producing its own cars in Brazil, and now it wants to source more of its parts in the country. It says by the end of the year, it's aiming to produce and source 50% of its vehicle components in Brazil. BYD is also building stamping, welding, and painting facilities nearby so it can transition from making semi-knockdown kits that are imported from China. Its plant in Brazil will be able to make an estimated 150,000 cars a year by the end of this year, and then it will eventually plan to double that capacity. Along with that, BYD hopes to be #1 in sales in Brazil by 2030. The first production model to get CATL's new sodium-ion battery was officially revealed. Nevo, a brand of Changan, will feature a 45 kilowatt-hour sodium-ion battery in its A06 sedan. The company says the battery showed exceptional performance in extreme cold and will provide over 400 kilometers of range on the Chinese test cycle, which we estimate would be about 175 EPA miles. However, no word on when the vehicle will go on sale yet. But Changan says models from 3 of its other brands will also feature CATL's sodium-ion battery, and CATL says the development of these batteries is progressing really fast and expects to add another 100 to 200 kilometers of range. One of the reasons we're seeing a push into sodium batteries is because the price of the material that gets processed to make lithium batteries has shot up 70% in the last 3 months. And be sure to tune in to Autoline After Hours today when Ray Scott, the CEO of the Lear Corporation, will be our special guest. Ray is one of the savviest executives in the industry, and we're going to get some deep insights as to what's really going on in the industry today. David Welch from Bloomberg will also be on the show, so join John and Gary when it all gets going at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today. But that brings us to the end of today's show. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you later for AAH.
Autoline Daily is brought to you by Bridgestone, solutions for your journey. CSP, the composites solution partner. Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering, boost your game. And thanks to the following YouTube and Patreon members:
At CSP, we work with OEM engineers across the country on their journeys to lighter, safer, and more eco-friendly vehicles. Learn more at thecsp.com.
Making a life full of memories, one road trip at a time. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Weather Peak tires with a 70,000-mile limited warranty.